Before we begin today's review, I would just like to mention that this product can be found at Dan's Dinosaurs. Dan frequently offers incredible deals on new releases, as well as peace of mind when ordering items from outside the States. Be sure to check his store frequently for new merchandise, and if you should ever order from him, be sure to mention that Killershrewfan sent you in the comments box at checkout. It's a massive help to the growing channel, and I appreciate it. Now with that out of the way, let's get to the review. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Killershrewfan's 12 Days of Reviews. I would like to profusely apologize once again for falling behind schedule and not getting this review out in time for the holidays, but after that brief delay, I am back in business. And even though Christmas has technically come and gone, I don't see why we can't still celebrate, and since this review was originally slated for Christmas Eve, it's still duly festive. Something meant to make our view a little more green for the season, if you know what I mean. That's right, it's finally time to take a look at the recently released Once and Future King by Nanmu. After being revealed in February of 2021, the figure finally arrived in mid-October, and I decided to hold off on reviewing it, even during Nanmu November, so that I had something to celebrate Nanmu with during 12 days of reviews. And what a figure to do that with! This piece is a staggering showcase from the company, boasting the same level of screen-accurate detail and painting prowess we've come to expect from them on yet another fan favorite dinosaur. It's been a long wait, but I'm so excited to finally take a closer look at it. Be sure to check out my unboxing video for a look at the packaging and extras included, but for now, let's jump right into the figure itself. Now, upon first impressions of the figure, the one word that comes to mind is presence. This hulking figure has such an imposing aura befitting of a tyrant king. The beefier build and stalking posture really gives it a sense of power. And when combined with the optional base, it has an absolutely commandeering look to it as it surveys its kingdom from your shelf. Speaking on the base, like their Giganotosaurus, this doesn't come with the standard figure. You're able to add it on for an additional cost. And this is easily the greatest drawback of the entire piece in my eyes. Usually, I love me a good base, and on one hand, it's nice that Nanmu offers it as optional so that collectors who don't care can save a few bucks. But on the other hand, the base costs nearly a third of the actual figure, which seems a bit exorbitant in my eyes. I mean, it's an expensive figure in its own right, but if you're wanting to get the base to go along with it, you're looking to spend in the triple digits. It'd be one thing if the figure needed a base, but it doesn't really. It's incredibly well balanced, as you can see, so the base really is just for added aesthetics, and you're gonna pay through the nose for that. In its defense, it is a lovely and quite literally solid addition to the piece. It's extremely hefty and well sculpted in craggly, cracked, uneven, rocky layers, which gives it the naturalistic appearance of shale. The paint job is also quite involved, with various shades of grays and browns making up the base, and even dry brushed layers of greens, purples, and pinks, which gives it a sort of faux pearlescence, almost like rainbow obsidian when taken in from a distance. When you get in close, it's easier to see the brushwork, which does somewhat defeat the illusion, but overall it's a very high quality perch to display your Rex on, and easily the best base we've gotten from Nanmu so far. I love how the incline plays off the hunched over posture of the Rex, angling it upward and informing its downward gaze to create this very pleasing and balanced image that's sure to be a standout on any shelf. Before we move on to the figure itself, here's a look at the underside, which features the title of the piece and Nanmu logo against a flat black plastic finish. So that's the base. It is quite nice in its own right, but I'll let you decide if it's worth the extra cash, since it isn't essential. Moving on to the figure itself, the first thing I must comment on are the overall forms and proportions and how that has changed between their previous Tyrannosaurus Rex Alpha. Notable differences include a more compact and deeper skull, larger growths along the nasal, as well as more pronounced keratinous brows and sharper jugal horns. The neck is also considerably thicker, with the stocky dewlap dangling just past the gullet. It's also just more robust in general, with a much more rotund body shape and accentuated muscles along the dorsal dorsum that have been exaggerated by the hunched over posture. All in all, it's just a tank of a figure compared to the lithe build of Alpha, which I still hold is based more on Jurassic World's older Rexy. Still, it's great to see Nanmu capture the various aspects of in-universe sexual dimorphism on this buck. They tried to just do a repaint of Alpha and call it good, but I'm glad I held off on that because we finally got a proper take of it here. Or maybe they just bamboozled people into buying the green version of Alpha just to turn around and do this. Double bubble. Getting into the nitty-gritty of the skull, this could very well be the most detailed execution we have ever gotten from a company already renowned for its incredible artistry. The face is absolutely stuffed full of scales of varying shapes and sizes, with larger ones adorning the massive lower mandible and running along the oral margin, while a smattering of smaller scales run across the fenestra, leading up to the ornamental scales that frame the openings of the underlying skull and run up to create overgrowing keratinous brows above the striking orange eye. The eyes themselves have been lovingly seated against a variety of bags with the perfect amount of eyeshadow to make it really pop. Meanwhile, the teeth are made of that beautiful semi-translucent plastic and have been lovingly treated with watery brown tones to really give them a sort of nicotine-stained level of rot. The jaw is articulated and opens to reveal some beautifully wrinkled, fleshy pseudo-cheeks and a wonderful tongue. It might be a little difficult to appreciate in my lighting here, but the combinations of pinks, reds, and even sickly blues with a subtle gloss really gives it the appearance of shining, moist, mottled flesh. And while we're up here, here's a nice look at the head-on view. Is that a Jurassic Park Rex, or is that a Jurassic Park Rex? So yeah, the head on this thing is an absolutely immaculate showcase on Nanmu's part. There's so much detail on it, and it's all so clearly defined without being overstated, all while being the spitting image of the animal from the film. Now, some have mentioned the lack of the buck's distinct scars on the face here, and whereas, yes, those features appear to have been omitted, if you look very closely, you can see what looks like very subtle scars creeping up between these scales from the lips. Whereas it is a shame the detail is so subtle and not painted, I still appreciate that there are hints to it amidst all the other great sculpt work, and if you're handy with a soldering iron and brush, you might be able to carve out some convincing looking scratches on your own if you see fit. So yeah, that's the head of this figure, and if that isn't enough to convince you it's a winner, then I don't know what else will. Still, moving on to the stocky neck, you can see a lot of great creases and areas of bunched up skin forming with the turn of the head. Meanwhile, the gullet features all these great wrinkles and delicate folds forming along the dangling dewlap, complete with a leathery skin texture. When you look at the opposite side, you can see the skin stretch tighter over the pulling muscle tone stretching up from the base of the neck. Even so, you have still got all sorts of striations etched into the skin, carved out from a lifetime of movement. Meanwhile, all those overhanging folds of skin in the throat have been sculpted with some extra pull to them as they stretch out with the curl of the neck. As far as the fine details go, I was actually delighted to see the scale work continuing down from the face onto the neck as opposed to just having a hard cutoff. It's so fine that it's almost imperceptible, like a very high grit sandpaper texture with larger statement scales sprinkled throughout. Once you hit the midsection, you're treated to all these great areas of leathery skin stretching over the torso and gathering as you move down the swell of the gut towards the underside. Areas around the limbs then feature pulling skin forming with the movement of the curled up arms and bracing leg. Meanwhile, the hunched back features rectangular scales that run across the spine and transition into the more prominent skin texture. The opposite side is much the same story, although you can once again see it stretch tighter over the ribcage with excess skin being pushed up against the torso by the movement of the thigh. The tail is held sweeping back with a gracile downward curl, and you can see all those tensing cords of muscles flexing at the base of the tail. As far as the detail work goes, it's more of that leathery skin texture as well as pulling tension lines forming with the movement of the thigh. And speaking on the legs, this Rex has got some thunder thighs, complete with massive flexing muscles feeding down into absolutely bulging calves and robust ankles. The toes feature the typical plate scaling and wonderfully weathered black claws complete with gray and brown dry brushing. Something I must comment on would be the way the fleshy foot pads of the feet sort of spread out beneath the weight of the animal. That's not something I think I've seen on a model before, but it's a very interesting treatment that I think helps to convey the posture of the animal as it transfers its weight onto that foot. All of this has then been covered with very fine wrinkle skin texture that stretches and enlarges over the curve of the swelling muscle tones. The arms are sculpted curled up, with the wrists being somewhere between pronated and supinated. Meanwhile, the muscle tones have been rendered quite well, and even with the proportionally tiny arms, this Rex still looks like it could curl some weight. If we move along the underside, you can see all the fine scales adorning the lower jaw as we transition to all the wrinkling, sagging skin over the gullet. Once you hit the midsection, you can see the pectorals covered in more leathery skin before transitioning into the usual armored underbelly we see on the JP Rexes. And here's a look at the Rex from a dorsal view, where you can see all those lovely scales adorning the figure's head and shrinking as we move down the neck, which has been rendered with all of those striations and areas of bunched up skin. The scale work becomes less defined until just above the shoulders, where you can see larger rectangular scales popping up amidst the striations and continuing all the way down the remainder of the figure. As far as the pose goes, this has been the subject of some criticism, as it seems to blatantly copy the posture of the Sideshow Collectibles Dinosauria T-Rex statue. Both figures have been sculpted mid-stride, right leg forward, arms curled up with a slight left crane to their neck and downward lean to their posture, as if approaching the rotting remains of a long-dead prey item. If you ask me, this is a perfectly valid critique, as it does look like a pretty spot-on recreation. That being said, there are only so many poses in the world, and I do appreciate the posture, as I think it perfectly speaks to that confident and powerful kingly presence. That, and as a fan of the original statue, but someone who could never afford such a big, beautiful piece, it is nice to have this as a cheaper substitute. Now for the paint job, and oh boy is it a doozy. The base tone is a lime green with dark forest markings running along the dorsal region and streaking the torso, tail, and legs of the figure. Between that, you have got some rusty orange tones and yellow and green bars for additional visual interest. The underbelly is then a light cream coloration with a dark wash that transitions seamlessly to the main tones of the ventral region. Meanwhile, the face is a gorgeous mixture of colors, with the cream tones adorning the lower mandible as you transition up to a lime color that runs along the oral margins. This has then been dry brushed over in a dark forest, almost bluish tone, which takes over and runs across the nasal ridge. I just love the way the lime color really pops amidst the darker scales. It's a really impressive area of paint, and potentially one of my favorite areas of color on the figure. One thing I'm not a huge fan of, however, would be the treatment of the fenestra. I like the base tones of yellow, but the painting of the stripes and framing scales on mine feel a little heavy-handed. I have seen other models that boast more subtle stripes though, so it could be just mine, and that's a bit of a bummer. Mine also has a couple of paint slops, most notably on one of the teeth, the tip of the tail, and then there's this weird area on the thigh. I'm not sure what this is. At first I thought it was a slop, but then I see it crop up on basically everyone else's models, so I have a hard time believing it's a mistake, but it definitely feels like it shouldn't be there. I've heard it might be from where the plastic is injected into the mold, but even then I'm not sure, so if anyone out there has any insight, feel free to let me know. Either way, it's a blemish, no two ways about it, but the work on the rest of the figure is so impressive that these minor imperfections don't really bother me all that much. And that's the figure, truly an impressive beast in its own right, but once you combine it with that massive stand, you really do get one showstopper of a piece with an absolute ton of shelf presence. Installing the figure is just a simple matter of lining up the fixed peg on the base with the hole in the ankle of the Rex's foot, and Bob's your flippin' uncle, you got yourself one awesome display. As far as the size of the model goes, you're looking at an impressive 17 inches long, or roughly 44 centimeters, and right around 6 inches, or just past 15 centimeters high at the top of the raised back. But when stood on its base, it gains an extra 2 inches, coming in at roughly 8 inches off the ground, or about 20 centimeters. I believe the buck in the film was somewhere around 39 feet long, although this is hardly hard canon, just the average estimates I've seen floating around. If this is true, that would put this model at just under 1/28 scale. And for those of you wondering, the bottom of the base measures roughly 5.5 inches long, or roughly 14 centimeters, while the top of the base measures about 8 inches across, or around 20.5 centimeters, in case you were curious to know how much room you would need on your shelf to accommodate this base. Now then, let's get into some size comparisons and get comfy, because there are a lot of these to make. For starters, here it is once again alongside the female version of Nanmu's previous Tyrannosaurus Rex, and I do think these two make great companion pieces with one another, as the in-universe sexual dimorphism seems reflected in both the color proportions and sculpts of the figure. All that you're missing is a human figure to split between them, and hey, your Lost World display is all the more film accurate. Now for some other big theropod comparisons. First up, here it is alongside one of the Nanmu Giganotosaurus behemoths, and that is certainly a fitting name. As you can see, Behemoth manages to stand head and shoulders above this Beefcake Rex, while also having a very similar length. Still, it is clear which one of these is the bulkier offering, and even if I was floored by that Giganotosaurus earlier this year, I think it's safe to say it's met its match. Next up, we have the Indominus Rex, or should I say the Berserker Rex from Nanmu, and I bet that the ending to Jurassic World would have been a lot less exciting if this was the matchup we got. This Rex would have absolutely obliterated that thing if it were that small and skinny in comparison. And speaking of very different outcomes, here it is alongside the Sorna Usurper, its Nanmu Spinosaurus Supplanter, and sooner or later, a false king will always fall. As a final big bad Jurassic comparison, here it is with the Berserker Raptor, again being absolutely dwarfed by this massive Rex. And here they all are, the star villain dinosaurs from every Jurassic film all together, and I am absolutely loving this image. Even if some of them are far from perfect representations, and one of them isn't even the design we ended up getting for the film, it's great to have these stylized creations all together on the shelf, and no matter if you get one, two, or all of them, they do look amazing with one another. Now, before we move completely away from in-universe comparisons, what kind of a T-Rex review would it be without bringing in a Triceratops? Here you can see the once-and-future king alongside Nanmu's Triceratops' heavy lance, and I really love how these two size up with one another. The downward angle of the Rex's open jaw also works perfectly alongside Lance, as it looks like it's going in for a crushing bite to the neck. You're also able to bring in the sick variant to pose alongside the king as if he's standing above a recent kill, and yeah, that looks incredible. Moving away from JP figures for a final Nanmu comparison, here it is alongside their V-Rex from Peter Jackson's King Kong, and as you can see, even if the Shadow Monarch edges it out in terms of height, its bulk and length doesn't have anything on the king. Then for another film comparison, here it is alongside Rebor's amazing Carnotaurus Rex, and even that tank of a figure can't quite compete in terms of height or bulk. Honestly, that figure was a definite high point of the year for me, but now that I have this new offering from Nanmu, I think it's going to be quite tough to choose which one of these will win out on my list for top 10 figures of the year. And now, just for the heck of it, here it is alongside a 1/35 scale scientifically accurate Tyrannosaurus Rex, that of course being PNSO's Wilson once again, and I always love these kinds of comparisons. You can see that Wilson is absolutely dwarfed by Nanmu's offering, but that almost makes it look like the king is leaning down to say something to Wilson, perhaps affirming that he does indeed look dope. And Wilson would probably say that the Nanmu figure also looks amazing, because kings support kings. And finally, here's the once-and-future king alongside all the wannabes of the past. You've got the Rebor Bites the Dust Tyrannosaurus Rex carcass and jungle variant of their Killer Queen JP Rex sculpt, as well as the Papo Squatting Rex, which for years was the quintessential JP model for the cost-conscious collector. Even if each of these figures are not without their merits, they were a far cry from being screen accurate, with Papos and Rebors both lacking the defining features of the male Rex. The corpse came closer, but it is nice to finally have a big, imposing, screen-accurate model for the movie collection. And altogether, they form a nice timeline that leads up to the true golden age of dinosaur model collecting. And that was Nanmu's Tyrannosaurus Rex, the once-and-future king, and a king it truly is. This piece absolutely rules. Everything about it is a win, from the sculpt to the paintwork. It is such an impressive work of art that will surely stand out in any collection, especially if paired with that base. Although Nanmu have impressed me a lot in the past, this is certainly a new high for the company, and I for one am bowing down to this royal figure. But as always, I want to know what you guys think of it. Do you own it yet? Are you planning to pick it up? And what would you like to see Nanmu do next? If it's anywhere near as good as this Rex, I'm sure it'd be a knockout of a figure. Drop a comment down below, and as always, thank you so much for tuning in to today's belated review. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again soon when I finally wrap up this year's 12 days of reviews with a video that is quite literally a year in the making.